Hello and welcome to the Performing Animal Rights podcast series. My name's Ben Hunt. I'm a performance artist and practice-based researcher doing a PhD at De Montfort University in Leicester. We've got a short but sweet interview with Abi Foster today. Abi is an animal rights activist and on social media her work is under the name Animal Autonomy, and she recently tagged her ear with a livestock tagging gun and with a livestock tag in a show of solidarity with the animals that go through the action in the animal agriculture industry. The action was part of a fundraiser for an animal sanctuary where she managed to raise £5,000 through her action. So in the interview we talk about that and what it means to do that kind of action, as well as activism in general as well. Like I said, it's a short but sweet one, and it was a really interesting conversation which I hope you find value in. And if you do find value, please do share and review this podcast where you're listening to it on. All that's left to say is on with the podcast. Well, thank you, Abi, for joining me for this interview about your creative practice in animal rights. So the first question is, what originally compelled you to perform for animal rights? So I know you do a lot of songwriting and performing for animals at sanctuaries, and I know you recently tagged your ear. So what compelled you to go down these avenues of creative approaches?
So funnily enough, I'd never actually thought of it as like performance until you sent me the questions, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's really obvious. I should have thought of that. But what compelled me to do it really was I got into activism maybe like 4 years ago maybe. And obviously I was doing like street activism. I was doing like all the general normal avenues you do when you get into activism. Yeah, I was already a musician, so writing songs about it just happened naturally. It was never really a conscious choice to I'm gonna do outreach in this way or activism in this way. It just sort of, that kind of thing was on my mind when I was songwriting, and that kind of thing came out in the songs. So yeah.
And what got you to the point of thinking I will tag my ear? Was it just a thought of I wanted to feel empathize with the pain the animal goes through, or was there something else? What was the thought process there?
So there's a sanctuary called Beneath the Woods in Wales where I've done a lot of volunteering, and it's an amazing place, and they always struggle financially. And as well, I had a lamb who I'd raised myself, like bottle raised. The farmer didn't want her, and she had to have her ear tagged because for legal reasons to be at the sanctuary they have to if they've been moved and stuff, which is horrible. And she's like this little gentle, like loving creature. And to think of someone like her having to have her ear tagged, and the pain and the trauma and the not knowing what's happening that goes through that was like really heartbreaking. So I was like, this could be an interesting fundraiser if I did it too. And once I had the idea, like I just couldn't really not do it. And I ended up like planning the whole thing. And then next thing I know, we've raised £5,000 and I'm doing it. And I'm like, oh God. But yeah, I did it.
You did, yeah, and you got so much support. I remember on the day, in the days leading up to it, so many activists and so many supporters sending kind of solidarity kind of
Yeah, it's really
statements and
nice.
things. Was there any obstacles? Were there any activists or people in your circles going, "Don't do it"? What you
Oh
thinking?
yeah, quite a lot. There was kind of two camps. There was like the supportive ones who were like donate money. Like someone donated £780 with the caption, "Please don't tag your ear." But then there was others who were like, "Oh, there's actually nothing wrong with ear tagging," and "Oh, you shouldn't do that to yourself. When are you gonna stop? Like, what other horrible things you're gonna do to yourself? Are you gonna humanely slaughter yourself for money and stuff?" But yeah, I mean, the people who kind of say there's not an issue with ear tagging have sort of a point, because it's just a symptom of the fact that livestock are kept how they're kept. Otherwise it wouldn't exist as a problem. But it's symbolic, as you say, it's performance. So yeah.
It is. It's interesting. You say that it's not a big deal in the wider scope of it of how animals are treated, but it's interesting in the sense of you doing that was massively brave and also makes people uncomfortable. Like it made me feel uncomfortable, the vision of you doing that. So
Yeah.
it means a lot to humans. So surely it must mean a lot to non-humans as well, which is interesting that the conversation is it's not a big deal, but even the
Oh yeah,
not a
it's
big
definitely a big deal for individual animals who have to have it done. I
yeah
just mean that it's not like it wouldn't exist as a problem on its own if
yeah
what we were doing to animals didn't exist.
yeah definitely. It is interesting that just how the littlest things can be seen as cruel if they're done to us, but
Yeah.
not to non-humans, which you highlighted perfectly in your action, which was so inspiring. Going back to the activism, why animal rights?
Well, I went vegan 9 years ago when I was 15. And before that, and during that time, I watched a lot on YouTube about like how they really treat animals and all the stuff they go through. And then I went vegan and maybe like forgot about the animal rights side of it for a little while. I guess it was just really important to me. And like, even though I wasn't doing anything, it was still like there. And as soon as I started like doing animal rights stuff again, like going to Manchester Pig Save and volunteering at sanctuaries where you'd meet these happy animals who'd escaped those hells, I don't know, it's just the most important thing to me. Like the amount of problems we'd like solve if we stopped doing that to animals, with the environment, with health, for the individual animals themselves, like it would be like enormous.
Yeah, definitely, I can empathize with that for sure. Is there a looking at the tapestry of your activism from starting to be inspired by animal rights in your songwriting and your performing, and then up to the ear tag action? Do you feel that there's a timeline there where there's certain elements of activism that you want to stay on and keep doing that, so keep performing and keep doing these quite brave actions, or was it just a spur of the moment thing? Is there a certain approach to your activism or evolution of your activism from these creative points that you've put into your activism?
I hope so. I mean, it's not really a planned out kind of like crescendo of like bigger things to come, and I've got loads of things like planned from like what I've done before. But yeah, I mean, every time I end up like looking after an animal like one to one, every time I, see all these horrific new things that come out from farms, like the investigations and stuff, like it gives me like more fire and more ideas of things to do to do my best to try and help or try and change even just one person's mind.
Is there an inspiration from, because you volunteer with sanctuaries, was there a moment where you started to go to these sanctuaries where, well, just speaking, where I'm getting to is speaking personally, I was very much doing street outreach, talking to people about veganism, and then I started adopting loads of animals and volunteering at sanctuaries, and I felt a much more closer relationship with the animals, obviously because you're there physically, and my activism changed because of that, or my ideas of getting people closer to the animals had changed a bit. Was there anything there with that? It doesn't have to be that obvious or that physical. It could be that you went to a sanctuary, because you've got lovely videos of you performing to rescued animals. Was there
Yeah.
moments there where you're like, this is driving my activism in a certain way, or just spurring you on generally?
I mean, I remember the first time I went to Beneath the Woods, I stayed for a week, and it's like in the hills in the middle of nowhere, and it was like winter, and it was like very hard work for a week, and I'd never done anything like that before. I think it was maybe like a month or two before that all the pigs there had arrived. There was like, I think it was 85 at that point, or 91 or something, and they'd all come from like a cruelty case, and I'd not spent much time around pigs before. I'd been to Pigs in the Wood once, and that's about it. And they were all just like, they'd come from this horrific place, and now they were like safe the rest of their lives. And I remember just like on the train home, just like reading their story, because I'd not actually read up about it before, and just like crying and being like, oh my god, like these animals, like they've come from this horrible place and so lucky, and that's such a small percentage, even though to anyone saying like, oh, you've got 100 pigs, it's mental. But it's such a small percentage of all the pigs that are in those horrible situations, and I think that really inspired me to like, do more or do as much as I can, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's lush. Yeah, getting to know these individual stories and inspiring you.
Yeah.
That's fab. Speaking about your experience of this ear tag action, what were your feelings leading up to, during, and then after? If you can pinpoint them at all, or it'll be really interesting to see how your feelings as an activist and as a human, as an animal, a human
Yeah.
animal, went through that experience. What was the journey, the emotional journey for that?
I mean, when I thought of the idea, I was definitely just like excited about it, because it was very far off that I'd ever actually have to do it. Because I was like, oh, if we raise 2 grand, then I'll do it. And the thing went very, very slowly for a while, and it was like, yeah, this is a great idea. This is fine. But I liked like the imagery and like the way I got to like, I don't know, like set it all out and talk about how the animals go through this and how doing it in solidarity would be like a powerful thing for me, and like represent what they go through in like a human form, I guess. And then I kind of tried not to think about the actual physical tagging other than just organizing the practical things, like where I was going to be, who was going to do it, getting the tags, getting the tagging gun, that kind of thing, until maybe like the day before. And I know on the day I was super nervous. Like I couldn't really conceptualize it actually happening and the fact that I was actually going to go through with it. And the guy who was doing the tagging put the thing up to my ear, and I was like, you can see it on the video, like I'm like freaking out for a second, and then I just like completely just like close my eyes and just breathe. And I've just accept the fact that I've got to do this because it's $5,000 for the sanctuary. It's like a powerful thing for the animals to have someone do that, and to, well, hopefully that's the idea anyway. It was really painful, but afterwards I was just kind of relieved that I had actually gone through with it, I guess.
Yeah. Was there any practical obstacles leading up? Like you said, you got the tags, you got the gun, the puncture thing. Was there any like queries into changes for you as a human that would be different for the non-human animal? Like, was there a specific tag you chose because of the shape of your ear? Because I can imagine human ears are quite different to. So I was touching my ear just to make sure what it's like. Different to a lot of animals raised for food and for clothing and that. So was there anything in that regard?
Yeah, so obviously I did it on my earlobe, and that's a lot smushier than like the cartilage on, say, like a pig or a cow or a sheep's ear. So we got the smallest tags we could find, just, you know, because again my ears are also smaller than, say, a pig's ear. But on the day I was going around tagging random things to like test it out and see how bad it is and stuff, and realized that the small like sheep tag that we'd chosen didn't go through everything properly. And I was really scared that it wouldn't go through my ear properly, but it would like shove the lobe into like the canal of the tag and trap it, and that would be so much more painful than if it pierced. So we ended up going with someone had some pig tags on hand, which were a lot bigger, and I couldn't really keep them in because of how big like the circle around it was. It like pushed my earlobe out, and it was, the thing that goes through was bigger, but it was sharp, like it had a metal point on the end, so we were more confident that that would go through and pierce it. And that was like a change in like the last 20 minutes before it happened.
Wow, yeah, imagine if it went the other way. That's yeah, a good choice. Was there an expectation, because there was blood? I watched the video and there was blood, and kind of quite a traumatic, not in a highly traumatic, but it was like I was averse to the vision in a positive kind of inspired way. Was there expectation of blood? Did you know there was going to be blood? And
the blood thing, there was a few of us who were talking about it, and I was like, well, when you tag animals there's not really that much blood, and when you pierce your ears there's not much blood. So I was expecting to start with that there was going to be no blood, and then a friend of mine, Gina, she was promoting it all over Twitter, and she'd keep adding like more and more blood to the like the photos to like promote it, and I was like, oh god, does she know something I don't know? But yeah, there was a bit of blood. It was very manageable amount of blood.
it was really powerful image. Again, it kind of plays to this kind of, it seems like the idea of it seems not a small idea, but it's an extravagant version of piercing an ear, which people do. Yeah. People pierce the ears, but seeing that blood, it was like, oh, there is this kind of bodily trauma there, which is really, really interesting. Yeah. What was the experience after that? So you said it hurt at the time. Did it? How was the days after?
Yeah, it was like I'm going to use the word agony because that's how it felt when it went through, and like maybe the like 15-20 minutes after, I got it all kind of cleaned up as best we could with the tag still in, and then like I was at Beneath the Woods Sanctuary, so we just had to get on with looking after all the animals. I was scraping the yard with my ear tag in, like spotting all the pigs who had the same one as me, like maybe half an hour later. So yeah, but it was awkward to sleep on, and it was like painful now and again, like if they got tugged or things afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it was manageable pain-wise in the days after. It was the actual going through and when it was like fresh and also taking it out that was like really painful.
I suppose it was the best place to be, wasn't it? Because you're inspired by these animals. The action happens there, and then you interact with these animals again. It would have been a bit I don't know, a bit more removed if you were doing it somewhere else. So that kind
Yeah.
of carried on, which is great. Was there a kind of a feeling of that was worth it? It was worth doing. Was there a kind of, I could have raised £5,000 by doing something else? Or was it like, yeah, I was meant to do this?
There was quite a lot of people, like especially like Twitter trolls and things, who were like, you could easily just like do a fundraiser and not have to tag your ear. But I think anyone who's run a fundraiser or anything like that knows the practicalities. If you put up like a Just Giving page and be like, we're just raising money for this sanctuary, and that's it, there's no like shock factor, there's no motivation, there's no if we get to this much, this will happen. People just don't donate. It doesn't happen. Like, so for me, there was never I could have raised £5,000 without doing it. Like, I'd have to do something to raise that £5,000. Like, that's the most I've ever raised, and it's the most shocking thing I've ever done. So I think there's a very obvious correlation between those two.
Yeah,
And yeah,
definitely.
it definitely felt worth it being at Beneath the Woods around all the animals, and with Sasha, who runs Beneath the Woods pretty much on her own, and knowing that just this, like, I mean, just a little bit of like damage to my ear has raised £5,000, which can actually do some like really practical things there. Definitely felt like really worth it, and like not that much of a sacrifice really, because of where the money's going.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting thinking about activist sacrifice, from like time sacrifice and money, financial sacrifice, but also bodily sacrifice, and how far we're willing to go. Like, there's activists who brand themselves a 269 movement, and then there's this vigils, people stand in front of lorries to try and stop them, and people get, obviously there's been examples of people being killed that way or being seriously injured. So it's really interesting from that point of view. Would you do that again? Would you put your body in as part of an action to raise awareness or money? Would you sacrifice your body in another way, or the same way again, to do it again?
I don't really know how to answer that question, to be honest. I don't know. I think if I had a creative idea that felt like it made sense in the same way that my ear tag idea felt like it made sense to me, then yeah, potentially. But at the moment, I can't think of anything that like I would do that would like involve like hurting my body in any way.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. I don't want you to.
Yeah.
It's just it's really interesting, just the psyche of activists in a way out that we want to not want to, but I suppose we do. We want to connect with these individuals that are suffering on a massive scale, and these acts of solidarity are really really powerful, and kind of hopefully bleed through to, pardon the pun, bleed through to to people who may not think about that. Do you think, obviously it was a fundraiser, and I'm imagining a lot of people who gave money were vegan or animal rights activists. Do you think there was also a semi-purpose or a smaller purpose to raise awareness of the suffering, even if it's as small as an ear tag, this highlighting the suffering of animals to people who maybe don't think about it?
I hope so. That was definitely part of the intention. Yeah, I kind of pushed it as much as I could on social media, both the aspects of like raise money for Beneath the Woods and animals go through this because of how they're kept and because of your choices and things. So yeah, I don't know if that happened or if that came off, but I hope it did.
Yeah, me too. I'm sure it did. Just the visualization of it is powerful enough. It's really interesting thinking about what you did and others performative creative kind of things, where these gestures, where it's doing a multiple of things. It's raising awareness, it's raising money, it's raising solidarity, it's also motivating activists. Did you feel like there was the feedback you got, and for yourself in general, did it feel motivational doing that act?
Yeah, I mean, a few people said to me like, oh, if you get to this certain amount, like I'll do it too, or I'll get a tattoo of an ear tag or something like that, which is really nice to see, like people supporting and getting on board with it. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's well, yeah, I hope so. It's really good to hear that there's people inspired by it. Well, I'm inspired by it, so I'm not as brave as you though. So I don't think I've got small lobes. That's my
I was
excuse
told I
anyway.
have two small lobes to do it for quite a
Okay,
while. I was like,
okay,
oh,
okay.
decided
No
now.
excuse then. Where do you this action you did and similar actions that have happened? Do you think this has a place in animal rights movement as an important place, like this kind of, also thinking of your songwriting and your performing, is there obviously there's a place for it, but do you think there should be more of it, or we should be focusing on a certain specific kind of activism, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think like there's generally like, you know, there's direct action, which is brilliant, but a lot of the time that's very like undercover, like people don't see it. And if we want to reach the general public, I think not instead, but definitely as well, we need that more kind of, as you say, performance based stuff, like whether it's people standing in the high street and showing footage and dressing as animals, whether it's you know, whether it's people tagging their ears and fundraising about it, whether it's people singing about it, whether it's whatever people can do, like, you know, big protests with like signs and all that kind of stuff, so people can see it, so it's visually there for people who didn't know about it to start with. It needs to happen like alongside the direct action, I think. So I think like every angle of activism is really valid, and I think it's kind of a waste of time to be like, which one's the best one though, which one should we do, which one should we shun, like do what you feel is right for you and do what you feel is effective, and what if you keep doing it looks like it's effective, like
which you're a shining example of by the things that you've done with your creative practice and your activism, for sure. Thank you, Abi, for your time, and thank you, the listener, for listening to this episode. We have loads of episodes before this one as well, so if you haven't already, please do give them a listen. This podcast is available on loads of platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. So please do have a look around, and please do share, and please do check out Abi's work under the name Animal Autonomy, which is on YouTube and Instagram. She's got some great videos on there, including a recent pig rescue, as well as amazing songs that she posts on there. There's more conversations to come, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, thanks for listening, and goodbye.